Female Founders Speaker Series. This is our second iteration of this. We're hoping to continue to offer these conversations monthly, and so we're really excited that y'all have joined us. I'm going to just take a few minutes up front here to chat a bit about female founders and about the speaker series, and to also kind of talk about our team real quick. So let's start with the team. My name is Sarah Martin Henderson, and I work with Georgia Tech's VentureLab, which is also the National Science Foundation's Innovation Core South region. So we are doing, what we do is we put on lean startup-based boot camp style programming for research teams across the South that are eager to understand how their research fits into the marketplace and eager to take a path towards entrepreneurship and startup and creating startups. And so I have been with VentureLab now for 2 years, teaching this methodology and coaching teams towards their startup journey. And prior to joining VentureLab and Georgia Tech, I was teaching innovation teams and entrepreneurial teams at large corporations, leveraging somewhat similar to lean startup methodology, leveraging design thinking, so another very customer-centric approach to building out new solutions. And I am very excited to be here with you all today, and we'll be talking to you and just a little bit more about what our Female Founders Program is and the speaker series. But I want to pass it off to my team members so they can give a quick intro as well. Leah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Sarah. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. Welcome. This is our second go ahead at our Female Founders Speaker Series. And I've had a blast working with all the women who have joined us through Female Founders. It's been a really uplifting time. So, and we love the fact that we can continue being a connector bridge for all of you. And thank you so much to Thaena for being on the call today. Again, I work at VentureLab as an educational outreach coordinator. I've been there for about 1.5 years, assisting Sarah and Melissa with all of our programming. Prior to that, I was working at the Language Institute at Georgia Tech with all of our international students. So my background is a little zigzaggy, but it's great. So again, thanks for being here today, and I'll pass it over to Melissa.
Hey everyone, Melissa Hefner with Georgia Tech's VentureLab. Been with the group since 2014, working on training teams to go to the national program, like what Casey just finished and what Mo is getting ready to do, both of the women who are on this call. And then coaching teams at the national program as an adjunct instructor as well. So lean methodology is our jam. This is what we eat, breathe, and live, teaching nascent startups a new way to discover a path towards the market. So that's who I am. That's what we do. And I'm going to go back on mute and I'm going to finish my lunch now.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Leah. Okay, let's chat just very briefly about the why of the Female Founders Program. So we initiated this program last fall, and we wanted to get it started because we realized that while there were a large number of women researchers at Georgia Tech, we weren't really seeing that translate over to the teams that we were seeing in our programs. And we felt that we could do something about that at VentureLab. And so what we wanted to do was really honor the fact that there was a shortage of women entrepreneurs in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and that we could create an environment where they might start to feel more supported or start to see others like them. So as we were building out this program, we were doing quite a bit of research and realizing that this wasn't just a Georgia Tech problem, but a bit more pervasive. And there's quite a shortage of female-led companies in the startup ecosystem generally. And a lot of that, what we have uncovered, seems to have to do with the networking piece, the fact that a lot of investment comes from like-minded individuals. And so we wanted to create an environment where the female founder teams that we were engaging with were going to be surrounded by women coaches, other successful women entrepreneurs, women instructors like us at VentureLab, and that we could start to create this community of folks that had similar experiences and could chat about what it means to be a woman entrepreneur and how that manifests as you're going through the journey of creating a startup. So what we ended up creating is we started off with an introduction to lean startup program, and that was very successful. We had quite a lot of teams that were eager to continue the journey, and so we ended up creating a second follow-on program where teams could go much deeper into the understanding of their market, the understanding of their customer segments, and the value propositions that they were generating for their startup. And that we would coach them through that process, through the activity of customer discovery. So since then, we've now run this program. We've run the phase 1 program twice, and we are in the second iteration of the phase 2 program, and we're eager to continue to bring this to female-founded and co-founded teams across the South, but really across the nation too, for people who are eager outside of the region that we support with the National Science Foundation. So ultimately, we are keeping this open to all students, staff, or faculty teams. We're also keeping it open to community teams. We tend to look for startup teams that have 2 to 4 people, just because of the customer discovery work that is involved. But we also are open to taking in solopreneurs. We do want teams that are led by a woman or co-led by a woman, but we absolutely encourage mixed teams and all team members to join the program. So while we do talk about topics of what it means to be a woman leader or entrepreneur, we also focus quite a bit of the content on lean startup more generally. So we bring the lean startup methodology to our entrepreneurs, and we try to create this community of like-minded female founders. So one thing that we felt we've been missing during COVID, right, and in these virtual programs is the community building thing, right? So we've gone from being in person to being virtual, and as a result, we sort of lost some of that cohort building, the community building amongst each other, amongst the team members. And so we wanted to go ahead and start to create this female founders program as an answer to that. I mean, the female founders speaker program as an answer to that. So we wanted to continue to grow and extend the female founders program community beyond just the boot camp style programs that we were running, and to provide you guys with a way to continue to hear from other successful women, and to continue to kind of reconnect with us and reconnect with each other. And so with that, I bring you to our second iteration. We are so excited to welcome in the co-founders of Thaena. So we have with us Andrea Macbeth, Piper Dobner, and Mary Phillips. And today they're going to talk to us about their journey with Thaena. And we're actually going to kick it off with Mary, who has, in addition to her role with Thaena, she had founded a startup team consultant coaching company called StemmBridge, where she helps teams think about vision and values and passion. And I'm not going to go too much further because she's going to dig into that in much more depth. So we're very excited to have this group with us here today and looking forward to hearing what they have to share. We will be opening it up for Q&A at the end of their presentation. But if you have any questions you want to drop in chat in the meantime, please feel free to do so. And with that, Mary, I will pass it off to you if you want to go ahead and share your screen.
Okay. Are you seeing it okay?
Yeah, looks good.
Okay. I have to play with multiple screens for a second. Right. Excellent. Wow. I so wish that when 4 or 5 years ago, when I first actually stepped into entrepreneurship, I had you guys. This is just incredible. My introduction to an entrepreneurship program started as being asked to be a mentor for a women-led team that was going through the I-Corps program. And I walked into a room that was a sea of pale male faces and basically bombarded with lots of questions and all the things that we were supposed to know. And I was the mentor trying to help this women-led team. And they were kind of looking at me for help. And this is one part in life where you realize there is a difference between being a mentor and being a coach. So it's lovely to actually hear Melissa, Leah, and Sarah talk about the fact that they coach you through. And because mentoring is a lot about helping people get to where they want to go, coaching is a lot more about helping people figure out where they need to go. Anyway, so entrepreneurship part, there was all these questions and value propositions and acronyms and MVPs. And then as they moved on and built out the website, it was like, what's your mission, vision, what are your values? And it was daunting. And as I walked through that with the team, it was two wonderful ladies who were engineers in humanitarian engineering, who were really on a mission really to support women in developing countries escape the poverty cycle. Anyway, they don't have money, those women in the poverty cycle. But anyway, the problem that we're trying to solve that I saw was like, how do you articulate your clear purpose that's true to you and what you want to do? How do you come up with a mission, vision, and value statement that is meaningful, that you'll remember, that's not sort of like a wordsmith cobbling of everybody else's vision, mission, and value statements that you put together? And how do you build your team? Is it the quest for the nearest warm body that looks like it's got the right resume, or is there something else that you need to think about? And so these were problems I started stewing on a number of years ago, trying to figure out how do we solve this? And I kept looking for answers, and lots of books out there that says you have to have all these things, but rarely did anybody ever teach you the mindset piece of like how you get there. So truth in advertising, this is why you're here. And you're going to hear our story. And stories are very important to the work I do because our stories inform how we think and how we approach life and what we do. Always look for your stories and other people's stories. And so we're going to share stories. In the first part, I'm going to share my story about sort of what I put together for StemmBridge and how I've worked with Thaena and how they sucked me into Thaena and now I'll never escape. And I love Andrea and Piper dearly. Anyway, so we're actually going to tell you our stories as we walk through it. And in part of telling my story, it goes back to the beginning. And this part, when I tell stories, you'll see how this fits in a little bit later in this talk. But I want you to think about your stories as I'm talking about mine. I fell in love with chemistry when I was 13, and I was a student at Gumley House Convent School for Girls. We were taught by nuns. Chemistry was not a thing that was a long suit for the nuns, but they supported me. I think my mother hoped I'd get over it. But I fell in love with chemistry. I pushed through, and I went on to get an undergraduate degree at Durham University doing chemistry. I graduated from Durham, and then I went on to do a PhD at Imperial College Science, Technology and Medicine in London, working on a fabulous project which was for treating cancer using photoactive drugs, and it was called photodynamic therapy. And it really did align with a lot of the things I had learned, especially, being at a convent school, about the purpose in life, which is like to do good and to leave this world a better place. And, there I was doing this great research, on something that was going to sort of save lives and transform things. So I was really happy doing that, and I was in pig heaven. After I got my PhD, I took a position at the University of Oregon as a postdoctoral scientist. And the project I picked there wasn't one that was driven by my passion, but it was actually driven by my need to actually escape my mother and my husband, who both had ideas about how I should live my life and what my reproductive rights would be. So it's a pivotal part, and I include it here because we make decisions in life about where we go and what we do that sometimes don't always align with who we are. And it comes back to haunt you a bit later. But it got me to America, which was actually one of my great ambitions in life, was to actually move to America. So I did my postdoc, and I was there for about 4 years, and a number of things happened, but I suddenly hit that crisis part. And this is where it's important to understand, to know your passion, because I suddenly was, I'd come across a system, there was sexual harassment, I was angry, I was overwhelmed to actually go forward and, as an academic research scientist, I was going to have to write grants, I was have to come up with my own research ideas and go think, and I was completely stuck. And so I actually left academic research and gave up my dream of pursuing a lifelong career in chemistry. My next transition, though, was, because I couldn't give up science, was to move to technology transfer. And you have them at Georgia Tech, and I'm sure you've interacted with them, especially if you're doing the entrepreneurship program, and they're all great people. And they'll have great ways of describing what technology transfer is, but my shorthand of it is it's the home of great solutions in search of a problem. And I started my career in that at Oregon Health and Science University, and then moved to Oregon State University. And along the way, I became a patent agent, studied the patent bar. But one of the rubrics you always use when you look through invention disclosures, these are the ideas and research discoveries that the faculty and students actually discover during their research. And often they're pretty bare bones. And so you're taught a rubric to evaluate, because the technology transfer office is a bit like a VC investor. They get the first pass at deciding whether an idea is good enough to basically invest the cost of patent expense. And then to do that analysis, you have to figure out, is there a market, and who's going to buy it, and is it important, and where could it go, and all kinds of other different questions. So the rubric is not, it usually was about 15 different questions, but it really kind of distilled down to, so what, who cares, why you? And a lot of people and investors will always do that. But there's a problem with that I'll get to in a bit later, but it kind of helped. And part of, I loved it. I did tech transfer for 15 years and saw hundreds of inventions and great ideas, and got involved with a lot of startups from the technology transfer side, and doing the licensing and the IP for those, and the contracts, negotiations, and their cap tables, and where they were going, and working with them. I thought I knew a lot about startups. And this is just on the screen, it's just a handful of some that I was involved in. And some of them were just like, when these ideas start, like NuScale Power started off as a miniaturized nuclear power station that would fit into a suitcase. And they could do it because they figured out how to make it safe. And that's now sort of just got $1.4 billion worth of funding from the government to actually scale that into big scale nuclear power. Other ones, which was like Agility Robotics, they've just, I think, got 30 million worth of investment. That landed on my desk when it first came, because the engineer that was looking at that, he'd actually been studying how ostriches run, and noticed that they have more springs in their legs to move. And so he could actually incorporate those ideas into a two-legged robot. And so he's now got contracts with Amazon, who will soon be delivering these packages to your doorstep, these two-legged robots. So there's lots of different wonderful startups that started off with very simple little ideas that have just exploded into just wonderful, wonderful things. But one of the things that came very obvious to me was that, and the same that I think you've noticed at Georgia Tech, and there's a real problem, there were very, very few women STEMpreneurs out there, very few women disclosing inventions to the technology transfer office, and even fewer that would even think about starting a company. And so this disturbed me a lot. And it disturbed me so much that I actually ended up lost again. Well, not lost, but confused. I started pushing back on the system, trying to figure out how to get more women involved. And I think one of the things that had changed for me over the 15 years is that my reason for doing technology transfer was to actually make these inventions real and to see them come alive. And when the zeitgeist changes in an organization and it becomes about making money, you feel it sometimes. Nothing really changes around you, but there's a shift. And so I was being asked to make decisions on a different rubric that was more geared to, will this particular person make the university money, rather than will this particular person, inventor, entrepreneur, help to make it real. And so that was part of me trying to figure through what had changed for me, why was I struggling with this problem, and actually thinking that through. So I actually left, stuck. So I actually left the university and went to work with startups from the other side. And one of the things I discovered about doing startups and my own experience is that the rubric's the other way around. You need to start off by asking, why you? Or why me? And why do I care? And what am I going to make that's important? And this is a little bit similar to the Simon Sinek talks, if you've ever listened to them, about asking the question, ask why first, ask how first, then ask what you're going to make. And so this actually got me involved in a number of startups. Portal Theatre is one that my husband started, and I helped him. And he was on a mission, really. He teaches theatre at the university. He wanted to create a way that his students could actually find a way to create their own work after they graduated. The educational system had really geared them very much to basically graduating and finding a job in regional or national theatre. He wanted to find a way to teach them how they could actually create their own theatre. So this was it's kind of an exercise in creative entrepreneurship. It's still going. It's very much my husband's baby, but I support him. And it's been a fabulous journey on that one, and quite successful. Collaborative Sense, I talked a bit at the beginning, was my first one that I worked with as a mentor and ended up working with them a lot more. That one didn't work out in the end, partly because what they wanted to achieve and what they were being pushed to achieve with their business model was not ever going to work. Ultra Biotech was a company I started with 2 faculty out of Oregon State University. Really was purpose was to really come up with standards for microbiome science, because I love microbiome science. That again didn't work out, but it was a really good experience. And the reason it kind of didn't work out is my co-founders were on a different trajectory than I was on, so we didn't have alignment. So it's figuring these things out. And bringing all this together is how I created StemmBridge, which I still have, but it's and I work with occasionally, and was how I met Andrea and Piper. And this is really about working through the entrepreneurial mindset, about how you create the business that you want to create, how it serves you and not your customer so much, but it's driven by you and your passion and what you need to do. So that when you have to pivot and you have to change, you know where you're pivoting and changing from. You have your center, and you can push back or move forward that's in the way that's right for you. And Thaena, Andrea and Piper will talk about, but I'm having so much fun with that company. So lesson learned from the other side really is that, we're going to have startup success. A lot of it is, it's really based on the timing. If you've got bad timing, you're never going to work. Team is vital. Your idea has to be great, but it's not the most important thing. Business model and funding, those things, it goes in that order: timing, team, idea, business model, funding. It's also always important to remember, especially when you get stuck into the lean canvas, that your business is not your product or service. If that was true with Portal Theatre, then the play would be the business. But the business produces the play, and we're actually trying to achieve something different. Back into saying, let your passion and purpose really drive your business model and the business you want to create. And the really important part of that is to be authentic and be you. Because at the end of the day, people buy stuff from you. And if you're not authentic and they can't trust you, they're not buying. So my way to actually figure out how to actually bring this all together, and this is, you can find this on the web and everywhere else, is really to actually start at the purpose diagram. Other people call it Ikigai. And it's really a way, and it's just a tool, like Lean Canvas is a tool, to really kind of collect your thoughts and put them together to see what fits together and what works and what's right for you. And I actually started this with Andrea and Thaena, Andrea and Piper at the very beginning, which is really trying to figure out what makes them tick. What is it they really want to achieve? Why are they doing this company? What's really important? And it's a way of just working through many things. It takes a lot of introspection, a lot of thinking. It takes a lot of thinking about what you really love and what you're really good at, not just what you got A's at in class and what you think you love, because in those intersections, you find your passion and you find your mission. And so when you work through it, and it takes a while, and lots of post-it notes and scribbling things out and asking people questions, and also thinking a lot about the problem that's worth solving, what the world needs, because this is an always changing diagram for you in some respects, because you're always finding new problems, you're always learning new things, you're always falling in love with something new. But when I work through it with Thaena, it starts coming together. And I'm not going to go into detail here, but you can start seeing that whilst you start sort of with the group, especially individually and then with the team, you start figuring out where the common threads are. You start realizing that your passion and came for Thaena is like finding balance. it's a core theme in everything that we do, in balanced ecosystems, balanced microbial ecosystems. From that passion, you can start pulling out what your values are. And these are values that are not plucked from some website somewhere. They are actually intrinsic and meaningful to you. It's how you make your decisions and how, going forward. And those values for us has actually changed how we've done some of the production, because we were using far too much plastic. So we thought, how do we get rid of plastic? And so we changed how we did things, and it's like, it works better. There are things that just come out. Also, what you find is that comes from this is on your passion. When you have a passion, you notice, it's your passion, because when things come up, you can't stop yourself from doing it. So for me, my passion is puzzles. And I know it's that, because if you put a puzzle in front of me, I cannot resist it. I have to do it and I have to solve it. Other people have different passions and different things that drive them. But it's collectively, it is that drive that will drive your vision for your company. And so you can start piecing things together. And it's, this takes time and it's iterative and you can work through it. But it actually generates for you, first your personal mission statements, but then as collectively as a team, you can actually then work together with a framework to actually talk about, what you all do and how you all go forward. So I said, and I promised at some point, that this would actually all connect to that lovely thing that we all know and love and have used. Another tool, and I'm quite fond of it. But my goal was actually to bring the two together and to combine how you could put your own entrepreneurial mindset and what you wanted to achieve and your passion and your mission and the vision of the way you wanted your life to turn out, and how to connect that to the lean canvas, so that when you had to actually make decisions or you had to pivot in your business model, you kind of knew where to go back to actually make those decisions. And what's kind of fun about this is that the bottom quadrant of the purpose diagram is what can you make that has value, or the service, which ties into your value propositions. And so, you kind of think through those, and for me, I've figured that all value propositions, based on trust and belief from your customers. You find that your vision becomes tied very much to the customer segments that you kind of see. You find that your team becomes that important part for figuring out the stuff to be done in that, on the left-hand side of the lean canvas, becomes very important about how you choose people, what they can do. And I include stakeholders in the team definition because they become really important. And so I have to move faster, I think. But anyway, the end of this is that you can actually end up mapping your own purpose and your team's purpose to the lean canvas. And it's kind of nice. And so at Thaena, this is just an overview of our team. I've included our investors. There are 2 more people actually that I've left off this team because we just hired some more people. But I would actually definitely say that, our greatest resource is the people and our investors, and team is really, really important. And so I think with that, I'm going to let Andrea and Piper jump in, tell their stories, and at the end we can have Q&A. And I'm happy to take lots of questions and go back over things later. And at this point, I will hand Andrea and Piper the floor.
Thank you, Mary. I am Piper. I'm one of the co-founders for Thaena. We also really love Mary. She was one of our first hires, and we were so fortunate to glean her onto our team. We absolutely love her insight and her background, and obviously she's got the experience that we need to push our business forward. My background and my passions really, I got my undergrad degree also in chemistry. I love chemistry mostly because I love nutrition. And I also thought it was really cool that I could start fires under a hood because I'm a bit of a pyro. So I was super excited that chemistry allowed me that opportunity. But nutrition's always been my driving passion and force around what I've wanted to pursue in my life. And chemistry was really the mechanism to get me there. And I was taking biochemistry without being enrolled in the chemistry department. And my chemistry professor was like, "What are you doing? Like, why are you in biochemistry? You had to get through organic chemistry to get here, and you're not a chemistry major?" And I was like, "No, I just wanted to understand nutrition." And he was like, "You're weird. Like, this is what weird people do. Like, you need to get your degree in chemistry so your options open up." And so I thought about it. And then And then he asked me if I would ever consider medical school, and I said, absolutely not. I'm never going to go to medical school. But a couple of years later, I found naturopathic medicine and decided to sign up and became a naturopathic doctor because I loved, again, the fact that they had more biochemistry than the standard medical education. And they talked a lot more about nutrition. We had a lot more hours in nutrition than standard medicine. And then I met Dr. Macbeth along the way, and we started really geeking out on the microbiome. And I saw somebody made a comment about who doesn't love microbiome science. I'm like, totally, I totally agree. The microbiome is really the mechanism for how nutrition infiltrates our body and how our body absorbs different compounds and how our body makes different compounds through these epic bugs that work with us. And ultimately, Andrew and I started working in fecal transplant, which was really the foundation for how Thaena was started. We use fecal transplant in our medical clinic to treat individuals who have Clostridium difficile or C. diff infection, which is basically an infectious agent that causes really severe diarrhea. And fecal transplant is taking stool from a healthy donor and we put it in capsules, so people swallow the capsules of filtered stool, and then that stool ends up repopulating the gut of the people who have a dysbiotic gut. Yes, yummy, very yummy. And what's really cool is that within 24 to 48 hours, people end up recovering, and their diarrhea generally subsides, and the C. diff tests negative within a couple of weeks, and their lives are back on track. This can be a pretty deadly illness for people, but what we started seeing in our clinical practice was that for people who had other comorbidities or other conditions that weren't necessarily C. diff, but were coming in the door with their C. diff diagnosis, we're starting to see really cool results. We saw depression turn around in 24 hours, which was amazing. And we've seen a lot of other neurological symptoms shift and change. And then in 2019, there was a study that came out that was a 2-year follow-up study to an autism trial where fecal transplant had been used to basically test to see how individuals with autism would respond. And these individuals also had gut disturbance associated with their autism. And what we saw was massive improvements, but at the 2-year follow-up was that some of those improvements not only sustained, but continued to increase, which was really cool. So we got really excited, and the phones at our office also started ringing off the hook. And parents were like, "How do we get this for our kids?" And we were like, "We can't give it to you because FDA has discretionary enforcement, and we can only use FMT for C. diff not responding to standard therapies." And at that point in time, Andrea looked at me and she goes, "What if we sterilize it?" And she'd been thinking about sterilizing fecal transplant for a really long time. This is actually, I'll let her tell the story. She had a really fun conversation with an impromptu conversation with somebody at the FDA that led to us being like, well, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time we start sterilizing our product. And basically, by the end of 2019, and after we had met an angel investor, we started sterilizing and then freeze drying our product. And we were like, all right, we're in the game of big business. And Andrea is a brilliant mind, and she's really got, I kind of think of her as like the mad scientist, Tasmanian devil. We joke about it sometimes being like the shitstorm, but it's because we like to talk. Like to talk and poop puns, so it's all good. We like to talk about that stuff. But she's got a lot of brilliant ideas, and I'm her co-founder, so I get to help her focus those ideas and figure out how we're going to move forward and what the trajectory is going to be and how to maintain all of the brilliance into a nice funneled opportunity for us to be able to make this project really work and happen, because my biggest passion is to help people and to support people, and there are a lot of ways that supporting the microbiome can really do that. And I'm really excited for you guys to get to meet Andrea because she's our brilliant leader. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Dre.
Thanks, Piper and Mary. It's an honor to be here and talking to you guys. It's I'm not gonna lie, as running a company, Piper and I have had a heck of a week. We've been in really tense negotiations with investors. We're raising our second round of funding, and it was funny that this conference is happening. We like finally came to a resolution last night, and I wasn't sure if I was going to come into this conference and be like, it's a terrible idea. Everything is stressful and you never know when you're going to get money. And then we got kind of an agreement that we're going to have our funding for the next round, and it's great. And I'm so excited, and our team's amazing. You know, I'll give a little bit more background on what we do as a team, as a company, but more about the journey we've been on as a company, because I think that's what is the interesting part of this. Piper, I'm also a biochemistry major. I love chemistry. I love thinking about how cells communicate with each other. I worked in molecular biology. I started a PhD in biomedical engineering and did a couple years of bench research full time as a researcher before life happens. And, you know, my sister was diagnosed with the cancer I was studying, and I took care of her full time. She's been in remission for 10 years from leukemia. But, you know, life happens, things change, and your trajectory shifts. So I am a scientist at heart. I became a naturopath to prevent and take care of the people around me, because I really believe nutrition was at the heart of prevention. And then came full circle when the microbiome science really bloomed, and we had this opportunity to work with fecal transplant, which for me, the microbiome was the mechanism of action I needed to intellectually understand why what we do every day matters. And I've family, my dad's an environmental scientist. I grew up, like, one of my first favorite books was Silent Spring by Rachel Carson, you know, about how bad PCBs are in the 70s. And I think about environmental toxicity a lot, and, you know, chronic disease, and why the problems we're facing, and what can we do for solutions. And I fundamentally believe the microbiome is at the root of one of the next phases of us making solutions to help people not suffer. Unpacking this epidemic of chronic disease and aberrant response to infectious disease. So we got really excited about the microbiome. We had an angel investor who was a mentor. She came out of a women's entrepreneurship, and she basically grabbed us. We applied for an accelerator, had no idea what we were doing. And she was like, I want your poop pills. They're going to make me skinny, which is something a lot of people say to us sometimes. And then we were like, no, let's unpack that. Not the goal. And we got catapulted into this world. We watched YouTube videos about the language. I didn't know what an investment. I just, none of this made any sense to me. We signed up for courses online. We did crash courses in what safes are and convertible notes and how to value a company. I flew to Boston and had a steak dinner with like a real estate investor, which was the whole thing was like a whirlwind. But, you know, Piper and I made a decision early on. We were just going to go for it. And then we had lots of positive support and feedback from primarily female founder mentorship kind of stuff. And that was invaluable. And then I met Mary as a coach or mentor, and she really challenged us to do that exercise that she said, the chart. And I think that's when Piper and I realized what we were doing was really special. I mean, we knew it was special, but I think there was something about the process of us learning how to be leaders together and the different things that we complement each other on. And, you know, even just as recently as last week, Mary and Piper and I had a really meaningful conversation about vision, and we made a lot of poop puns for taglines. And every time we do one of those exercises, there's a new shift in our energy and the belief in what we're doing. And that's how we survived this last week of lawyers and investors, is that knowing no matter what we do, it's about our team and education and helping people. And that there's lots of decisions we can make, and some of them will be better than others. But in the end, we can keep coming back to that mission and vision, and that's been really helpful. I'm trying to think of like some other fun anecdotes that have happened recently. But, you know, we went from a 2-person team. I think it was just Piper and I for several years, not paying ourselves. There's a huge elephant in the room with entrepreneurship, which is there's a level of privilege, whether it's privilege to have the time to have a second job, or privilege to not be the primary caregiver of a family, or privilege to have money that is independent investment, because like none of this would be possible without that privilege that we brought into this circumstance, right? And so we worked our butts off and had privilege, and the timing was right, and we're both really motivated, and Piper's an excellent conflict resolution person can pretty much, solve any human problems between people. And then we started hiring people, and everything has shifted in a way that's really exciting, and it feels good to have. We love our team. They're like family, and it's a whole new set of problems now. We don't get to like go into the lab and pipette the poop anymore, which is kind of sad for us because that was really fun. And now everything is shifting towards a new strategy of management. And I guess the takeaway for me, I'm a tangential person, so Piper or Mary reel me in, but like the mentorship along the way has been invaluable. Not only having Mary as our mentor, but then the honor of her being like, I believe in you guys so much, I'll come work for you for, way less than she's worth, but none of us can pay ourselves what we're worth yet, which we will. And then all the other people who we've been bringing into this sphere, I think is a reflection of that foundational work we do on articulating why we want to help people, and why we think the microbiome is so fascinating, and why we think it's the future of solving really big problems for health and humanity. Bacteria are responsible for degrading trees, and they evolved, millennia ago to take care of that. And they will probably be how we deal with plastics, and they will probably be a component of how we deal with climate change, and they will definitely be a component of how we solve our health crisis. And understanding that on a mechanistic level is fascinating for us. And we are also learning how to do that within a system that's inherently broken, right? That doesn't allow for women entrepreneurs. And so we're using all those resources, but I don't know. It's hard. All right, stop me now, Piper, Mary.
So can I jump in real quick and ask you a question that popped up, Andrea?
Sure.
So we've got, two. How do your poop pills impact autoimmune diseases, such as folks with alopecia and hair loss and that type of thing?
Tricky. That's a tricky question to ask.
So the gut microbiome, I don't know if I want to turn this into like a 2-hour lecture on what the microbiome and immunomodulatory pathways are, but it's fascinating. Basically, our microbes educate our immune system. We each have our own ecosystem, right? So we are mouth to anus a donut, and the outside of our skin is an extension of that donut. And every surface of the donut has microbes and ecosystems like islands on a planet. And they're all interrelated through climate like a planet, but they're also unique islands. And so our mouth microbiome and our gut microbiome and our skin microbiome all communicate and educate our immune system to behave. And when you have autoimmune disease, the immune system is sounding the fire alarm when it shouldn't be. And so we're at the very early stages of understanding how these microbes and the metabolites they make, so the microbes poop, interface with that immune modulatory system. And the chemistry, like, inducing Tregs and stuff, we are just at the beginning of understanding that. So we are using FMT to work backwards to understand. Nobody expected FMT to change symptoms in autism. No one's expected FMT to get rid of hepatic encephalopathy, brain swelling after end-stage liver disease. No one expected FMT to improve outcomes in people doing immunotherapy for melanoma. And so now we've had all these clinical, observations and small scale studies to now work backwards and say, what do we think the mechanism is? And that's what we're doing at Thaena. And our product has some component that's immunomodulatory, although interestingly, not like it doesn't. I mean, the clinical component of this is that it, in theory, helps autoimmunity over time, but it doesn't get rid of joint pain the way turmeric or fish oil or other tools we work with do. But it will improve, constipation or brain fog or, depression in ways we didn't expect it to. And so I think the biology is really cool and complicated, but the short of the answer is we don't know everything, and that's what we're doing with Thaena. We're an education platform that is looking to use our tools, our products, to collect data and empower future research and development. And so that was the exercise we actually did a week ago. Is Piper and I sat down, and Mary, and said, we want to drive changes in healthcare, and these are the areas we care about: cancer, antibiotic injury, neurocognitive. Okay, so we don't want to be a drug company. How do we push that? We create data to inspire collaboration and further research. And then how are we going to collect that data? We're going to create products, and we're going to do a science-led based kind of approach to functional medicine, and do the best we can to do education and create community around that. And so that's our platform of our company.
Andrea, thank you for that. And thank you, all three of you, for what you shared today. I definitely want to open this up to Q&A to the audience. I had one other question, though, from the chat that I thought we would just ask, that Mo asked. She said, are you guys taking interns? she's very interested in what you guys are talking about. So just with that, maybe you guys can elaborate on just in general, one, are you taking interns? But two, how do you guys think about growing your team? And how do you, when you're making those decisions to grow into a new, I know that you've grown kind of rapidly, I think, that's my understanding. So I'm just curious how you guys have been making decisions about that.
You take that, Piper. You're our people person.
I mean, it's been a kind of methodical, long-term methodical process. Like, we met Mary, Andrea really started mentoring with Mary well before we hired Mary. And a lot of our employees that we've had, we've found them through different avenues. So we actually we are in scrappy startup mode. We joke about it all the time, where it's like, how can we get the work we need without necessarily paying, because we don't always have the money to pay. And so, like, we got to the local university and we started asking, like, can we do work study students and have them come in and work as like part of our practice, learn about the microbiome, and then like we could pay half price for their work. And in that, we found two amazing employees that we've basically coddled for the last 2 years, and then we just hired one of them full time, and we're super excited about having him on board. And the other one we've got part time until she graduates, and she's talked to us many times, like, she's an engineer from the military, like, we're gonna get her once she graduates in a year. And so we've kind of fostered different relationships along the way that have just, people have fallen into our laps. And lots of interviews. We did do one Indeed post where we interviewed a ton of people, and that was exhausting. Interviewing humans is very exhausting. And then we brought in a couple of them and really realized pretty quickly they didn't work. And it's a quick, once you realize they don't work, it's a quick fire at that point in time. And really keeping your idea of who you want on board pretty streamlined to, like, it's okay to be nitpicky about who you have in your first years of startup, because you want people who are, number one, going to work their butts off for you, who are passionate about what you're doing. I mean, we want people who are stoked about the microbiome. And so if people are excited, then we're excited. And you can't educate passion, but you can teach people how to get the job done if they're struggling in one way or another. So I don't know. I think that would probably be the best way to answer that question. We've had a lot of people kind of fall into our laps. One of our employees like reached out to us a few years ago and wanted to come talk to Andrea about microbiome science. And they sat and drank coffee and talked about the microbiome and totally nerded out. And then we were like, in 2 years, we're going to hire you. Like, we're going to figure out how we can hire you. And now we've got her. So it's really just about networking and really keeping your eyes open as to like who are going to be the key players in your in your chess game that you're playing, because all of this ultimately feels like a game. We joke about it all the time. We're like, it's just a game. Like all these investors are throwing this money at us. That's cool. Like awesome. It's like monopoly money. Let's see what we can do with it. But like ultimately we have to be really, really smart with our money too. And anytime we do get funding, it's like awesome. Do we have the opportunity to bring on another badass employee? And if we do, like really one of the best things about working with Andrea is like we really value our employees and we want our employees to feel like they mean just as much to this company as Andrea and I do. And we know we're the co-founders and like there's a hierarchical structure in any patriarchal business out there, but we really want people to feel like they're on a similar level as us and they have clout in the game and they can speak up when they feel like things are or aren't moving in the right direction. And we really want our employees to feel heard and to feel respected. And I think that that's a really big part of this too, is the more brains you have on the team, the more intellect you have you're working with. And so that's really fun. It's been a really fun adventure.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Piper. And I think that's really helpful to hear. I know a lot of the teams that we coach, one of the big struggles really is figuring out how to form that team and where to find the talent when they notice that there's a gap in the talent that they need, and really making sure that the folks that they bring on not only can fill the skill set, but also align really deeply with the passion and the vision and the goals of the company. So I think that's really great to hear that your response on that.
Yeah.
I wanted to see, is there anybody from the audience that had a question that they wanted to pose to Thaena, to anybody from the co-founders? We have a question from audience member Kim. She's asking if you have any tips on how to set up a cap table.
I mean, the internet's a really valuable resource. Piper and I signed up for YouTube seminar. There was a local woman doing a really cool class that had like a crash course 101 and she provided an Excel template. I did the class. I learned one set of things. I was like, Piper, you got to do this too. And then she separately did the class and we got really different things out of it. But cap tables you can find everything on the internet. It's filtering it. That's the problem, right? But anybody who tells you you have to spend lots of money for something up front hasn't done the scrappy YouTube version of it. And so, that's something I think we learned early on was like, we didn't need to spend $300 on Salesforce because we weren't there yet. And we shouldn't have listened to that tech bro upsell us. But lesson learned, and we should have just done our own Excel version or Google Docs. And you can do a cap table that way until you need Carta, which is really expensive and we're going to pay a ton for, but you don't need that at the beginning.
I think also jumping in there, knowing how you want the cap table to look in a couple of years is important. So to be intentional about your cap table. And I've watched Andrea and Piper be very intentional about, what percentage ownership are they going to still have, in 2-3 years from now? Because as soon as you drop below that 50%, you start losing control and things can change. So it's being intentional about that and knowing where you want it to end up, because it's easy to take people's money. And they start, we kind of talk like it's a holy grail of getting funding. But actually, if you have a great idea and great timing, people fall over themselves to give you money. And so it's, figuring out, be intentional. So,
Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you for that. I actually, for the audience, guys, if you guys want to continue to drop questions into chat, I'll be happy to read them out over the next couple of minutes. But I did have another kind of deep question for you. Being female founders, women entrepreneurs, maybe you could talk to us a little bit about how that experience has been like. Have you encountered moments of doubt? What it was like? Perhaps we could hear a specific example, maybe even your negotiations that you said you went through yesterday. And if there's anything from the lens of being a woman in that position that you want to share with this group.
You go for it, Piper.
I mean, I was gonna say at one point Andrea had cut all of her hair off because she was like, well, if I look less like a, attractive female and I can go into these boardrooms with these men, then I can really assert myself, which I was like, I'm not cutting my hair. I love my hair. I'm a Leo moon. I can't help it. But I think that, this last week, especially one of our investors was really trying to push for us to sign paperwork that we felt very strongly ethically we could not sign. And, he constantly was blowing smoke at us like, oh, you guys, your product's amazing and this is a good thing to have your product wanted and desired and blah, blah, blah. But like, he was really trying to push us to do something we couldn't do. And so all weekend we went through waves of anger and frustration and irritation and all the feelings associated with those feelings. And we had some pretty serious conversations about like, hey, what does this look like if we don't get his funding? And how do we maintain our employees? And like, how do we walk away from something that just doesn't feel ethically right to us? And that's a really important thing to know where your morals are and to stand strongly in the morals, because eventually, like we called him yesterday, we're like, listen, we're not signing that paperwork. If you want to do this, this is how it's going to happen. And this is what you need to do. And he was like, great, send the paperwork over. So I mean, we had to hardball him a little bit, and he was really trying to walk a line of like, I'm a real estate investor and I work in big business. And he tried to throw all these big terms at us, and we really let our legal team handle it to some extent too, because on some level, like having a kick-ass legal team who's going to fight for you and vouch for you is really important. And we've got one of the best small business attorneys on the planet. She's like all about ethics, and we even text her like, if we do end up taking this money, are you going to think poorly of us on a moral level? And she's like, no. And so, his behavior was inappropriate on the call with our legal team. He mistreated one of our attorneys, and we were ready to walk away. And we basically let him know that that was unacceptable. And he caved, and we're going to get his money, and that's going to be great. So, on some level, like you got to walk a line and have some moral boundaries and also assert yourself. And I think that with men, I think with him especially, like he's been able to plow over people in different meetings of that sort, and we weren't going to take his shit, like point blank. We just weren't going to take it.
And I think I joke about how much shit we have to eat, right? Like all the time as a poop company, but also from like when we do interact with, people with traditionally male stuff, I think it is having a team around me. And like when I am really upset, I call Piper, and Mary is a cheerleader for us, always has been. And she helps with that self-doubt, because the whole psychology of it is disempowering us as women entrepreneurs. And in order to overcome that disempowerment, we have to really be working together all the time to make sure that we know what we're doing is right and not be second guessing. I interact with the world in different ways, and it's interesting to think about how me presenting different ways has changed the way men interact with me and the way I show up at a meeting. I mean, early on, Piper and I would go to like, I networked a lot, and I think you have to be authentic to yourself. And whatever that is, I get really mad. I get really mad at the injustices of it and the way subtle things will change the way people interact with me. And I'm still pissed off about it, but I think just knowing that that's real has been helpful, and talking about it and being like, when I have a power suit on and I show up to a room and I understand how I'm going to be showing up to a room and what that energy is, and there's a time and a place for that, it does help in some ways represent us in a way that helps us take us seriously. And then in other ways, knowing that the fact that we're female founded and most of the work we do is with women, and we prioritize our contractors, and whether it's our patent attorney or our FDA regulator, or knowing that if there's an opportunity to pay a woman in a space, or a female identified person, or somebody with feminine knowledge that wouldn't otherwise have that prioritized, that also feels like we're empowering. I mean, supporting feminine knowledge in STEM is a core part of our business that we don't necessarily talk about, but we just decided to do it early on. And I think that helps us feel confident in spaces. I mean, mostly it's like, fuck you, pay me, right? Sorry, I'm sorry about the language, but like we have to show up that way with that kind of energy. And I think we've had a lot of good mentorship to help us eat shit and know when we can do that, and help us not, and like put our boundaries up and place a line. And it makes us move slower, and that's okay.
Yeah. I really appreciate you guys sharing that perspective. You know, we have obviously we're running programs for female founders, and this conversation comes up a lot. Is how do you kind of, especially assert yourself, right, and get over some of that imposter syndrome, or we're kind of put in environments where that is put on us, even if we're not feeling it, right? Even if we are not walking into an environment feeling that imposter syndrome, other people will put that on us, and being able to kind of overcome those and navigate and manage the environments that we are finding ourselves in, and understanding the environment and the audience before you go in. And I think that's so important. We do have, are you guys able to hang on for one more minute? We have one more question from Cynthia. Is that okay? Cynthia, do you want to go ahead and unmute and say your question?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Cynthia here. So I think it was Piper who spoke earlier about just the importance of hiring employees that sharing your vision along the journey. Can you speak a little bit about what it's been like, not just hiring those people, but maintaining that, making sure that they also maintain that shared passion and values throughout, within a year, or because I understand the ups and downs of starting a business. So what's it like maybe halfway through the journey where people values and intention changes, so making sure that those stay aligned?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that, we've only had employees for, at this point, almost 8 months. So I can only speak to less than a year. But I mean, the part of being a startup is that we're also, between Andrea and I, we're constantly reevaluating and shifting and changing our mission and vision. And so communication, I think, is really key. And like making sure that our team knows where those shifts happen and when they happen. And when we do, like when Andrea said that we kind of reassessed our values last week and like reassessed our vision. And when that stuff happens, being able to communicate that to the team and having another, making sure that they know exactly what trajectory we're heading down. I mean, we've hit hurdles early on where we thought we were going to do one thing to really inspire one of our investors and show him that we were capable of doing what he wanted. But then, 3 months in, we were like, this isn't what we want. And that was a really hard pullback. And one of our employees had a really difficult time with that because, she was really the head of that portion of what we were trying to accomplish. So we were going to do a big manufacturing facility and she was in charge of it. And that was really hard for her because she was like, now what's my job? And it's like, well, your job's going to shift and change and we need to go down this other trajectory. It doesn't mean that you're not going to help us in so many ways with our, standard operating procedures and making sure that we have everything assessed correctly. And like, she's all about our like making sure we're in compliance with the FDA, which we are doing our best to get into compliance so that if and when they show up, we're ready for it. And so like there's so many other ways to do that. And so teaching her and helping rephrase that and helping her understand that like maybe it's not a building, but maybe it's more the background paperwork. And that's really important too. And like once she had an understanding of that and she could understand where her place was, I think that's another thing too, is like making sure your employees know what they're doing and how their importance is affecting the company is another really important part of the game. But it's hard because in startup life, we're constantly shifting and changing. And like you're going to find that too if you start your own company. You're going to be going through different phases of growth and you'll think you're heading in one direction, but something will happen and it'll push you in a completely different direction. You're like, okay. And you stop, you take a really deep breath, you talk with your team, you make sure that your team's like, okay, what are we really going to do? And like for me, when I talk with my team, it's me and Andrea. And then sometimes it's me, Andrea, and Mary. Like we'll sit and we'll just like hash it out together. And then we're like, okay, this is the new direction we're taking. We're going to head down this path. We need to make sure everybody knows what they're doing, how they're on board. And usually by the end of that week, everyone's got their new jobs. They've got their new ideas of what's happening. They've been talked to, they've been communicated to. And then also like we're trying to implement now monthly meetings where we all get together as a big team and everyone can kind of hash it out together on a big Zoom call. So I think ultimately what I'm trying to say in all those words is that communication is really important and making sure that you're communicating. I I really do think solo foundership's really hard. I think that having at least another person who's always there to bounce ideas off of, like Andrew and I joke about this all the time. We see things very differently, and we hop on phone calls and we hear things differently. So if we get off of a call, we hop on a call together and we'll be like, "Oh, did you hear this?" And it's like, "No, I didn't hear it that way at all." And it's like, "Okay, let's figure out where the middle ground is." And so having somebody else who hears things differently, who sees things differently, is only going to help you create a better business, because your brain's beautiful, but it's just one brain. And if you can have multiple brains on board, you're going to get so much more out of the interactions. And so like we learned that too. Like early on, we were running two businesses, and I was working as a physician in the clinic, and Andrew was doing all these meetings with the startup companies. And then I came in like 6, 7 months into it, and I was like, who the hell are these people and what are they saying? You know, and it's like trying to mesh that together so that we could work together as a team. I think having somebody that you can really lean on is so vital to survival.
Thank you so much, Piper, for that. And thank you again to all three of you, Mary and Andrew. Really appreciate you guys joining us today. I do want to be mindful of time. We had one parting question, more like a suggestion for you guys from the chat that I'll just leave you with. The suggestion of possibly creating Eat Shit merchandise. So just wanted to pop that into your brain. That one's from Mo, one of our lovely female founders. But anyway, I wanted to say thank you again. It's just been wonderful having you here. This was a great session, and I'm sure we could probably continue to chat and learn from you guys for another hour. But I want to be mindful of time, and yeah, I hope we can stay connected and help our female founders stay connected to you guys as well. And we wish you all the success as you continue down your journey.
Great. Yeah, reach out anytime if you guys have questions. We're happy to answer them.
So fascinating. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Take care.
Thank you, guys. And thank you to all the participants who joined us. We really appreciate you coming and joining us this month. We'll look forward to seeing you next month.